So this, so I have to put this like all my faith and my trust again into this car and into this driver. And without a seatbelt, we drive across Uzbekistan. So I'm like, it's go time.
Hello and welcome to One-Off Travel Stories. I'm your host, Andrew Tawasterna. Here each week, I will chat with someone about one of their favorite travel stories. That one story they've told countless times to friends and family around the dinner table. We'll hear captivating and sometimes unbelievable travel tales and learn about the locations where they happened. Today, I'll be joined by Sophie Roy. Sophie calls Montreal, Canada home. She is an experienced traveler and has had many amazing adventures. She actually recently got back from a wilderness trek in Torres del Paine National Park in Patagonia, where she joined a group as a solo traveler. Really cool. From a young age, her parents would actually give her stickers of countries' flags, which she collected in a sticker book, and she sort of said that this gave her that kind of travel bug, and ever since she's really loved to travel. When she's not traveling, she's helping build Oatbox, a company that makes and sells oat-based food products such as oat milk, granola, overnight oats, and bars. Definitely go check them out. Sophie's going to tell us a story about something that happened to her while she was traveling in Uzbekistan. She's also going to teach us a little bit about what she learned about the country. The story itself is something that's probably happened to most people who are listening and have traveled a lot, trying to get to a flight and not having a ton of time to make it there. However, context is important and the circumstances in this case are very interesting. So I'll let Sophie tell us more. Let's jump into it. Hey, Sophie, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Andrew.
Thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Glad to be here.
Speaking of which, where are you today? Where are you? I like to ask the guests when they come on because they tend to be all over the world. So yeah, where are you?
I'm in Montreal in Canada.
And I know this already, but so you're home.
Yes, I am home. And I'm in my kitchen, and it's a beautiful sunny day, spring day.
That's nice. That's nice. I know Montreal winters can be tough, although from what you've been telling me, it's been a pretty soft winter, not too bad from a winter perspective in Montreal, right?
Yeah. It's been a very soft winter, which is not good if you're into skiing like you and I. So it's been a terrible ski season for us.
Well, despite the terrible ski season, everyone's still looking forward to spring and summer because that's just an amazing time in Montreal.
Yeah, that's the time where everyone in the city is kind of alive. There's festivals, and we're all getting ready for that. We're putting our summer tires on our cars, and we're getting ready for summer. That's
amazing. I miss Montreal summers. I hope I can make it back soon.
Yeah.
It's so much fun. You guys really know how to do it well.
Yeah. I tend to not travel during the summer and just concentrate my traveling around the fall and the springtime, just because, it's in between seasons where there's not much to do.
100%. Although I will say it's funny. I live in Seattle, and everyone loves the summers here, but it doesn't get warm like the Northeast, it's kind of averages out at a kind of a cool 20, and it doesn't rain nearly as much. It is quite nice, but I tend to get away during the summers more to hit proper warm summer weather. So anyway, I appreciate that, being from the Northeast myself. The summers get hot, right? So Montreal gets hot.
Yeah. No, it's nice.
Awesome. Well, as you know, this podcast is about those one-off travel stories that kind of made an impact, the ones that you tell people about after you get back years into the future. So Kind of, if you could set the context for the story, what year is it? What are you up to? What's Sophie into at that time?
Yeah. So the year is 2018, so pre-COVID era, and and I went to Uzbekistan, and it's a friend of mine who we went to business school with, who's originally from Uzbekistan, and she lived there until she was 18 years old, and then with her husband, they moved to the U.S. and she went to university and has been in the U.S. since then. Um, and in 2018, for her birthday, she decided to organize a trip with 8 friends to her home country. Her parents now live in between Moscow and the US, and her sister is also in the US. So she hasn't really been back to Uzbekistan in a while. So this is also, new for her. And so this is like, we're going to our home country, and she's like, organizing this trip with a guide, with like a travel agent for us. So I'm
Wow.
like, this is a good time to go, because in 2016, the kind of the president, or should I say the dictator that was in place, died, and the new president was, so the second president of Uzbekistan came into power, and he wanted to open up a little bit more the country. So this was
Right.
kind of a good time to go in 2018, before, with the new president, and without like him being, I don't know, I guess a target. I guess it was just a good time to go back then.
Right.
So,
Just a window before, you never
exactly,
know what's going to happen, right?
exactly.
Okay. Well,
So yeah,
that sounds like an amazing opportunity. I mean, I don't think most people, I don't think it's always one of those areas of the world where if you're really good at geography, that's kind of like one of those last areas to go for understanding
exactly.
like all the different countries in that region. Uzbekistan definitely one of those. And so
Yeah,
just to
so
summarize,
it's a like once in a lifetime opportunity, and for most people, if you're saying you're going to Asia, they think of China, but Asia is super vast, and there's a lot of countries between Turkey and China, and Uzbekistan is kind of in the middle of that, but no one really knows about it. So when I told people I was going to Uzbekistan, a lot of them were like, Uzbek what? And like, is that where Borat was filmed? But no.
not too far away, not
Yeah,
too far away.
yeah,
And then the rest of the people on the trips, were they all friends of yours as well?
yeah, yeah. All business school friends. Yeah,
Okay, really cool. That's awesome. I mean, there's no better way to see a country than have someone, from there take you. But it's interesting the slightly different parameters of this one, being that the host hadn't been there in a long time.
yeah, yeah,
And I did she speak Uzbek is the native language, correct?
yeah. But my
Okay,
friend speaks Russian only.
yeah,
Yeah.
that
So
was going to be my
Russian
next.
is kind of the language of commerce and of politics there. Um, so there's kind of like that native Uzbek language that some people speak, but otherwise, if you conduct any business, it'll be in Russian. Yeah,
Okay, and I take it she spoke English as well.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, a lot of languages to have to learn. Okay, awesome. So take us, I guess start us off here from heading to
yeah,
Uzbekistan.
yeah. Well, my only task in this on this trip was to book my flight to and from Uzbekistan and get my visa. And this company and this guide was taking care of all logistics, so transportation between cities, like hotels, flights, and all of that. So um, going into this trip, I hadn't seen an itinerary. I just booked my flight, and that was pretty much it. I didn't get a PDF with a detailed itinerary. So um, yeah, I organized this trip. I tried to get some cash. So I mean, I guess the first hurdle into going to Uzbekistan is one, buying the flight. Visa declined my card at multiple times, thinking it was fraud. Um,
Yeah.
then trying to get the Uzbek currency, which is called the som, was clearly impossible. I went to multiple money exchange shops around the city. I mean, just got and I arrived in Uzbekistan and with no money and no detailed itinerary. Um, but yeah, so I
And,
mean,
and, and you flew directly to the capital city, which
yeah,
is
yeah.
Tashkent?
So Tashkent. So
Yeah.
no. So I flew from
Mhm.
Montreal to Rome, Rome to Istanbul. In Istanbul, I had to take my suitcase out, and I had to go and recheck it. And that's
Okay.
actually a very funny story because um, as I go into the Turkish airline bag drop line,
Right.
this Turkish airline employee looks at my boarding pass and he's like, "No, this line is not for you." And I'm like, "What do you mean? This is the baggage drop line." And he's like, "No, there's a special line for you." I'm like, "For me personally, as Sophie, or like there's a special line for Uzbekistan?" He's like, "Special line for Uzbekistan." And I'm like,
Okay.
"Oh, okay." And I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "People cheat." And I'm like, "What do you mean people cheat?" So I really
The
had to
bag.
get this story out. But he's like, if the limit is 60 kilograms, people bring in 100 kilograms. I'm like, how do they do that? And then he told me they slip like $100 bills. So he's like,
Ah.
he told me, it's like, I have a friend I know someone who got so rich he quit his job at Turkish Airlines and now lives on a boat with his family. So I was like, okay, should I be worried? Like, is our plane gonna take off? He's like, yeah, yeah. There's a special line now for Uzbekistan. So
I
we
wonder if they've ever had to like unload the plane. Like the weight restrictions are purposeful on flights, so you can only fly with so much. So I wonder if they've ever had to be like, wait, we weigh way too much. We can't take off. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So thankfully that was no longer a problem. But um, so yeah, I had a special line for Uzbekistan to go to Tashkent, which is the capital. Um, but the reason why I think there are so many people who have like overweight suitcases is that Uzbekistan, which is like a fun fact, is a double landlocked country. Um, so do you know
And
what
what
that
does that?
means? Yeah.
I have an idea, so please
Okay.
confirm. Yeah.
So you have to go through two countries before reaching the ocean.
Yeah.
Um, and do you know how many countries are double landlocked?
No.
There are
No.
only two in the
Oh,
world.
that's surprising. I was
Yeah.
gonna say, like, I was thinking maybe there's others in Africa, in like Central Africa, but so what's the other country? Do you know?
Liechtenstein.
Oh, okay. Yeah. 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 Interesting.
Yeah. So imagine having to go through two like borders before reaching an ocean. Like it just makes sense that, the cost of import is so high and like it's
Right.
hard to get stuff into the country. So what that Turkish employee also told me is that some people are just kind of mules. They go between Istanbul and Tashkent with suitcases full of things and then empty them and go back to Istanbul. And that's all they do all day. And like, just imagine taking Turkish Airlines, which is not a low cost airline, like all day, every day, just to import stuff.
Right. And have it be
Yeah.
worth your while. That
Yeah.
okay, that's making sense. So that they're literally importing using Turkish Airlines and somehow that's cheaper than whatever means like oh I guess over ground it must be a pain with those borders
Yeah.
um train whatever but yeah and it's not only I guess then to your double landlocked as you said but far from any bottles of water like there's a lot of land there
Yeah.
basically.
There's a lot of land. And especially if you have also a president who's very internally focused, um, there's not a lot of foreign companies going in. And these foreign companies, if they want to do business in Uzbekistan, they have to do joint ventures with the government, which is not always ideal for them.
Gotcha. Okay. So after they got over their suspicion, they figured Sophie's not illegally importing things.
Yeah.
You made it to your flight, I suppose?
Yeah, I land in Tashkent. There's someone waiting for me at the airport. I grab my bag, and we get out and we go to the car park, and that's
Did
kind
you
of
meet everyone there, or did you meet
no,
some
no.
folks in Istanbul? Or
I got there by myself, so
hmm,
the driver was going to drive me to the hotel, and we get to the car park, and that's kind of my first impression of Uzbekistan. It's just like a sea of white Chevrolet cars. That's it. And I'm like, oh, okay. Is that like the equivalent of the yellow cab in New York City? But no, it was just all white Chevrolet cars. And we started driving, and in the city, there were just white Chevrolet cars. That's it.
some sort of like partnership with Chevrolet? Like, yeah.
Yeah, so I heard the president didn't want to deal with multiple car companies, so he chose Chevrolet. They make three models in Uzbekistan, and I guess they don't bother with like paint color. They just decided it was going to be white. so so you'll have,
That's so
I mean,
interesting.
your trucks, your like some buses, but like personal vehicles, they're just all the white Chevrolet cars. There's
Huh.
maybe three
Wow.
models.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that keeps it simple and keeps it cheap, but
Yeah,
that must have been a little surreal.
yeah. So yeah, otherwise we get to Tashkent, and I mean, there's no H&M, no Starbucks, no nothing. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's quite interesting because it's really rare in this time, right, to go to a country and be very, I don't know, like not see a McDonald's and not recognize anything.
Yeah.
Um, So yeah, so we arrive in Tashkent, and Tashkent's the capital, and it looks like a very Soviet-looking city.
Okay.
So you can imagine just really wide boulevards, really big, imposing like government buildings, and like zero people on the streets and zero
Huh.
people around these buildings, where you think it kind of looks like a ghost city a little bit.
Huh. Okay.
Um,
Have you been to so it's an area of the world that I haven't done a lot of traveling in, like former USSR. I've been to Georgia, but Tbilisi was pretty vibrant.
yeah.
I've seen like I looked into going to Baku, and it seems like a lot of those cities have developed well, but to your point, like how vibrant are they really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've been to Moscow and yeah, Tbilisi as well. But this one seemed it had this mood or this vibe where it seemed to have all these wide boulevards, but no cars and no
Okay.
people. Just felt like they built these huge, imposing things just for I don't know, for looks, right? Just
Yeah, hopefully preparing for the future, but
yeah,
yeah, sort of like big infrastructure projects that maybe not necessary yet, it sounds
yeah,
like.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Interesting.
Um, so part of the trip, we were doing Tashkent and then two other cities called Samarkand and Bukhara.
Okay.
And the two other cities are part of what was called the Silk Road,
Yep.
which was like the main kind of commerce kind of route or road that went from China to Turkey. And those were very important cities and kind of stops around along the Silk Road.
Yeah.
And, from China, there was porcelain, silk, and spices going towards the west, and people were importing, I guess, gold going from east to west. So these are very important cities, historically very important. They're UNESCO now heritage sites, and they're big trade posts, but they also have mosques and like religious schools, and they're very, very beautiful. They're all made with these like turquoise tiles,
Hmm.
and so it was a very kind of really nice to visit them.
It must be pretty impressive, especially on like a beautiful day.
Yeah, yeah. I'll send you photos if you want, so you can
Yeah.
link them to the show notes. Or
Yeah, definitely.
um, so yeah. So I guess we'll get to the story.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so the story. So was a bunch of background, but this is how I escaped Uzbekistan, or maybe should I say how I realized I didn't like Uzbek techno music.
Okay. Those seem
um,
slightly different, but I'll let you get
yeah,
into it. That's
yeah.
it.
So after visiting Tashkent, Samarkand, we end up in Bukhara, which is our last stop. And the guide, logistics person, tells me on the last day, well, Sophie, your flying out tomorrow or the next day is at 6:30 a.m. So you're going to fly out tonight without the rest of the group. And I've booked you on a regional flight from Bukhara to Tashkent. And I've set you up at the airport hotel. So I'm like, okay, great. So I,
But was there a reason? Or
well,
was it just like, hey, not everyone would fit on the flight, so Sophie, you drew the short straw?
so everyone else was flying out later, and for some reason, my flight from Tashkent back to Istanbul was at 6:30 a.m., and so
Okay.
there was no other flight. So I had to fly out the day prior.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
I'm like, okay. She's like, but don't worry about it. It's a regional flight. You can get there 30 minutes before the flight, and everything will be okay.
Right.
So we're at dinner. I brought my suitcase to dinner, and my flight's at 9 p.m. So after dinner, she arranges a cab, pays for the cab, because at this point, I still don't have any currency.
No, no,
I haven't
no
been able
songs.
to get any money.
Yeah.
I've had multiple failed attempts at the ATM, like at different ATMs in Uzbekistan, where they just don't have any money.
Hmm.
And my credit card just is not accepted, and everyone just pays in cash. So she pays
Okay.
for the cab. I'm like, okay. Um, and I hop into the cab, and she gives me my boarding pass. So, like I told you, I had no clue what my itinerary was before
Right.
getting into this trip. And she booked all the logistics. So she gives me my boarding pass like right there, right then.
A lot of trust in
Yeah,
this person.
well, you do have to trust if you go to countries, that are just maybe not France or Italy. You just have to trust the local people, right?
Yep.
So we drive off to the airport. It's maybe a 15-minute drive. And as we're driving to the airport, it's really dark. And we get really close to the airport, and there's just these street lights, but nothing else. And
Okay.
we arrive at the airport, and it's pitch black. The terminal is pitch black. And there's just like security guards and military people with their rifles, just like
Yeah.
guarding the terminal. And
Huh.
so the cab driver gets off the car. He takes my suitcase out, and I don't speak Uzbek or Russian. So I'm just kind of miming, like, stay here, don't move, don't leave, don't go away.
Right.
And
Like,
I
is this
approach,
normal? I mean, there's no lights on. Is the airport closed
yeah.
or
So I
yeah.
get to the military guys who are like, they're not letting me in. They're like, no, like it's closed. And I'm like, but I do have a flight tonight. Like there must be a problem. And they're like, no, no, like this is closed. Like I'm like, since when? Like was the flight canceled? There's no flight. Um, so anyways, I kind of try arguing with them that I have a flight and that I need to go in and that there must be a problem or I must talk to someone at the airline to like get this sorted out. And then I just look at my boarding pass like real good. And you know how you can write like month, day, year, or day, month,
Yes, I
year?
do. I live in the United States, so it took a little bit for me to get this correct. Yeah.
So I figured like, oh shit, they like this boarding pass is not for today. It's
Oh
for
no.
another like completely different month.
Yeah, yeah,
So thankfully my taxi was still there, my cab. We went back to the hotel. So
yeah.
the
Okay, he
flight,
understood you at least.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we go back to the hotel and everyone's there. Everyone's still in the lobby. Thankfully the guide's still in the lobby. And so like that's all good. So here timing is really important. The original flight from Bucharest to Tashkent is at 9 p.m. I got to the airport at 8:30 p.m. By the time I get to the hotel, it's now at least like 9 p.m., right? Um, and my flight's at 6:30 a.m. the next day. So we're like, okay, now it's go time. We need to figure out a solution. So we look at flights, we look at trains, we look at like cars, whatever is available. There's a task force trying to find a solution for Sophie. And our guide, she was amazing. She found the only solution she found was a courier. So guess what type of car he was driving?
Chevrolet something or other.
Yeah, a white Chevrolet, a beat up car. So I'm like, great, I'll be his little package for the night and he can drive me to the so I'm like, okay, let's drive across this country. But like this car, I need to pause. Like it's a beat up Chevrolet. I'm like, I don't know if it's gonna hold like on this road. There are no seat belts, and this guy's probably 18 years old. Um,
Oh yeah.
I
How
Google,
far are we talking?
yeah. So I Google Map all of this, and it's a 9-hour drive.
Oh, that's
So
that's like that's exactly how much time you have. If my
no,
math,
because by this time it's 10 p.m.
okay.
So I have a 9-hour drive, but my flight's departing in 8.5 hours, and I still need to go and check in before that. So I'm like, it's go time. so this so I have to put this like all my faith and my trust again into this car and into this driver. And without a seatbelt, we drive across Uzbekistan on not a highway, like not a smooth, nice highway like you have in the US, but basically a one lane, very bumpy road in the desert in Uzbekistan.
In the middle
And
of the night, right?
in the middle of the night. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going like, I don't know, maybe 150 kilometers an hour, which is, I don't know, maybe like 100 miles an hour. We are speeding. Like I don't have a seatbelt on. So I'm like literally jumping on off of my seat, like my head touching the car, the roof of the car.
Your 18-year-old driver, he knew the mission though, right? He
Oh
was like,
yeah.
okay, yeah.
And if there was like a truck in front of us, he would just go on the high beams and the truck would move. But like he never slowed down, like not even once. Like I was scared, but I was like, you know what? He needs to do his thing. And the guy, I could tell he was tired because he decided to blast electronic Uzbek music the whole 9-hour drive. And so his trick was that he had his window wide open and it was freezing cold because we're in the desert.
Right.
And he was chain smoking. Actually, he wasn't just chain smoking, it was like a cigarette. Then he would eat and spit sunflower seeds and then
Right.
alternate that with drinking a type of like monster kind of energy drink. So
Yeah.
it was smoking, pumpkin seeds, like just like energy drink.
And did you guys have any common language?
No. None.
No, okay.
Like he only spoke Uzbek,
You're
and
just
that
there
was
like
it.
lighting his cigarettes and opening new cans of energy drink.
Yeah, and I'm letting him do
Go,
all
go.
that. I'm miserable, but like, and I'm scared. Like I'm thinking I'm probably gonna die in a car accident in the middle of Uzbekistan. There's no there's no cell service. Like I'm just gonna be like disappear in the middle of this desert. But anyways, so this is literally like a nightmare. But so yeah, at one point we stop. I'm like, thank God. And we stop at this gas station, and I'm like, okay, like great. And this guy pops the hood of the car, but so I'm like, oh no, I really crap. Like I really hope the car is okay because we have like literally 0 minutes to spare.
Yeah.
Um, and he takes this tube, kind of like like the gas pump thing, but he puts it in the hood of the car. Um, and so I'm like so confused. So I'd start looking at like my surroundings and what's written around all of that, and everything's in Russian. So I don't really understand what's going on. But at this point
Right.
in the trip, it's like a week in, I started understanding a little bit the Russian alphabet, like just understanding the letters. And so
Yeah, a
if
bit
I
of the
read like the letters, I like make out that it says like methane. So I'm like, oh, I'm at a methane gas station. Like,
Oh,
what's that?
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but like little, like I didn't know anything, but it took 20 minutes and then off we went again. But at this point, I was like even more nervous because I'm like, I feel like methane is a very flammable gas. And,
Wow. I,
and
I
I'm
don't
like,
know enough about methane to see how stable it is,
yeah,
but they're all flammable.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I couldn't Google anything like at this point.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so that's that. I later read that yes, it's a highly flammable gas, and that he had probably just like tweaked his car, and instead of putting like gasoline, he's like, I guess people put methane in their cars, and yeah,
Oh, this isn't like specifically a methane car. It's a gas car that,
it's a gas
they use
car.
methane.
Yes,
Interesting.
but it's not like on the side. It's like you pop the hood of the car and you put it directly into, I don't know what it looks like, but they put it
Yeah.
directly in front of the car.
Okay.
But
I don't
yeah,
know.
I don't
Maybe
know.
he was just like boosting, it was nitrous oxide, from like Fast and Furious.
Yeah.
He just needed to get you there faster. So he was refilling his NOS, I think they
Yeah.
call it.
But
That
so yeah, no, I've read a little bit about it, but yeah, people like will put methane in their cars, and it, yeah, it takes basically 20 minutes, so it's
huh.
longer to fill than normal like gasoline, a normal gasoline tank, but I hear it's like much cheaper. So
Right. Yeah. And I think in that part of the world they would have lots of access to it. So
exactly. So
that's
anyway,
fascinating.
yeah.
Also, not like I could understand your trepidation. It's you've had a lot of bumps in the road up to that point, so it's kind of like,
Yeah.
oh my god.
Yeah. But all this to say that we arrived in Tashkent at
Nice.
6:10, and I ran to my flight, and I
Man.
was the last person to board the flight back to
Holy.
Istanbul. But
Yeah.
this is how I escaped Uzbekistan, and how I decided that Uzbek techno music would not be part of my musical
I
repertoire
was just gonna say,
after this.
did you have any? Did you take any tracks for your playlist? It's so funny. It's not like you could ask, like, oh, what's this?
No.
And how heavy are we talking? Like very heavy techno music for
Oh
just
yeah.
like the whole
Oh
night?
yeah.
Oh my
Oh
god!
yeah.
So
Full
I mean,
blast.
I wouldn't expect you would have got any sleep anyway, but
No.
I'm sure that didn't help.
So yeah, that's my little story in Uzbekistan.
I mean,
But
kind of a stressful end to your trip. I hope the rest of it was more relaxing.
yeah, yeah, all the rest was good. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, Uzbekistan was great. It's lovely country where if you want to be, I don't know, yeah, taking outside of your comfort zone and visit somewhere that's off the beaten track, I highly recommend it. Um,
I wanted to ask as well, when you were talking about the cities, do they still have, I mean, maybe obviously they wouldn't be operating in the same way, but do they still have big markets? Like, did you visit any markets? I know. Yeah.
yes and no. Like I feel like you're talking more of like a bazaar style, like in
Yeah,
Morocco. Like no, not at all. No.
not maybe bizarre style, but that is kind of the
Yeah.
idea. Like, so that sort of Silk Road of trade doesn't really exist today. Those are just the cities that are still left over,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So
Yeah, it certainly sounds like one of those. I mean, just almost surreal. Some of these things that that you walked through visiting, which is
yeah.
always really interesting to see.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to go back and see how the country has evolved since 2018 and since this new president has arrived. I've read that they've really opened it up and are trying to get foreign companies to go into the country. Um, I read recently they're privatizing a lot of the joint ventures they had. The country had, when I went, no debt. Like there was no like credit rating for this country just because they had never taken on any like debt, which is really insane to be. So it's really special to be part of this kind of country that's so closed and so inwards looking. Like another interesting thing is that there are 35 million people roughly living in Uzbekistan, which is roughly the
Wow.
same size as Canada.
Yep.
Yet, like, I mean, the economy is totally different and just like I mean, it's quite a lot of people, 35 million people, and we don't really
Yeah.
hear about this country. So, you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's really interesting. I guess it still sounds like it's a bit of a tough one to travel to from North America. You got to get your visa and maybe you got to take a couple layovers. But definitely an interesting one to add to the list. I don't know when I'll get to that region, but now I'm very intrigued. Although I think after this, I'm gonna look up Uzbek techno because now now I want to know. Now I want to
Yeah,
know what Sophie listened to for 8 hours driving across the whole country.
yeah. I mean, I hear there's some skiing in like the neighboring countries of Kyrgyzstan if you like touring. So you can always do that and then pop over to Uzbekistan.
It's a great way to travel for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome, Sophie. Well, really appreciate you taking the time and telling us this wild story. Hey, maybe I know um, you've been helping build at a startup. Maybe you can build the startup that sells them the next car. Like an Uzbek only car. Get them
Yeah.
maybe in multiple colors or something like that. Get them
Yeah.
to produce it themselves, but
Yeah, I did get to try, and I was driven in a Lada, which is like one of those old Russian
yep,
cars from
yep.
the 80s. So, yeah, I had a ride in a Lada, and it was brown. So,
Oh wow! So I guess that's like driving in like an old Mustang in North America around there, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
The car was older than me, so it
that's
gives you
fun.
an idea.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks for taking the time. I really appreciate it, and yeah, talk to you soon.
Thank you, Andrew.
Well, that's it for this week on One Off Travel Stories. Big thank you to Sophie for joining us and telling her story, and we'll see everybody next time.